Hey, welcome back to Other Pixel Games. I'm James and we're going to continue to talk about my coding journey, or, well, actually it's now my indie dev journey, I suppose. Last time I mentioned that after planning out all of the work I wanted to do, I changed it all. I mentioned it being a combination of sickness and spookiness. So what did I mean? Well, the weekend after the last bit of work I did, I started thinking about the Scream Jam coming up. I started thinking about what I wanted to do, and suddenly I had an idea pop into my head, but I realised that I had no idea how to do what I wanted. I'm not going to tell you what it was I want to make because I want to keep that contained to the Scream Jam, which I will almost certainly be doing a video about. What I will talk about is how I prepared for it and the things I didn't understand that I needed to get a quick course in. Hopefully what I'm working on there will still be as interesting to you as the coding work I've been doing. With all that being said, let's get into week 1. The whole of this week was dedicated to one thing, and that one thing was procedural level generation. The game idea I came up with heavily relies on a procedurally generated world, but one that's set inside a building, so my idea was to have a chunking system. A system that drops pre-made rooms down into the world in a grid would be perfect, but I had no idea how to do that. So I set about learning. Learning. Okay, full disclosure, I did something I never wanted to do and swore up and down I wouldn't do. I let ChatGPT teach me. Okay, I get it, calm down, let me explain. When I went to do this, I first went to YouTube, then to Google, all the time looking for tutorials to teach me. But what I kept bumping into were like 20 plus video tutorial series, tutorials that would take me weeks to complete. Systems that were incredibly versatile and complicated, but wholly unnecessary for what I wanted for this jam. I really did try and find a tutorial or a breakdown of how it should work, but I just couldn't, and ChatGPT was right there. So yeah, I gave it a chance and, well, I both do and don't regret it. Here's the thing, I got what I wanted. It's a simple system that will check if a prefab has the door it needs to place it. It's exactly right for a game jam and I understand how it works when I look at it, but only when I look at it. I can tell you how my inventory system works right now. I can tell you how my movement system works, but unless I have the proc-gen system in front of me, I don't have a clue. So yeah, I got what I wanted, but I don't think I learned much of anything. Because of this, I probably won't use ChatGPT like this again, unless I'm in a situation where getting the thing is more important than learning, like the end of a deadline. So how does my proc-gen system work? In basic English, what it does is it creates an imaginary grid that spreads out from the player's start location. At the start location, it sets down a specific starting room by instantiating a prefab that I created to act as the starting spot that won't appear anywhere else. Then from there it places another pre-made room prefab at every grid point stretching out from where the player is. It doesn't spawn them infinitely, that would crash the game instantly, but it loads up 3 in every direction. When you move off of a room and into another room, it will save the state of the room furthest from you and then despawn it. It also records which room prefab was there, all this so that if you come back in that direction, you'll find the same room in the same state that you left it. The state that you left it in refers to any items that were in there. If you pick some up, then they won't be there when you come back. When you move into a new square and it places down new room prefabs, it also has to make sure that it can place down a specific prefab. Specifically, it checks whether a prefab it wants to place has the right doors compared to the room next to it. I imagine there will be some weird edge cases where if you go in a full circle without filling in a room, you might be unable to spawn something, but honestly, for a game jam, this is going to be perfectly fine. The only problem was that the game checked for 6 doors and, well, that was too many. I'm glad I tried it here, but man, 6 doors is too many. I worked out that if I have 6 doors, then to have one of every room combination, I need 57 different room tiles with no variants, assuming I didn't want any rooms with only one door. And I didn't because there was a chance that the proc-gen could lock up. Because of this, I realised 4 doors would be much better. It would require 11 different prefabs plus however many variants I wanted. At the end of my first week of work, I had the full system working how I wanted it to, but even after thorough review, I still don't think I learned much. I can describe how the system works as I just did, but not really how it does all of that. Week 2 is where sickness comes in. I got a day's worth of work done and then stopped for 2 weeks, so we're going to kind of merge that first day in with the first week back. In that one day, I knew another thing I wanted to know how to do was pathfinding for both NPCs and enemies. I decided that it would all be very complicated, so I started with the NPCs which would have set paths and, well, I got it in pretty quick. This time I did use a tutorial and it worked very similarly to some work I'd done before, so it came out quickly. The way I made PCs work was to create 2 empty game objects and have the character bounce between them. I did this by setting their velocity to the direction of one of the game object, then having it so that if the NPC was within 0.1 of the game object, it would change its target and direction to the other object. I also made it so that the NPCs couldn't be moved by upping its mass in the rigid body, and so it would stop if the player touched it by setting up an if statement around its movement in the update function that relied on a ball that would turn on and off depending on whether the player's collider was touching the NPCs. It was a productive day, and if I hadn't died for 2 weeks, I probably would have built upon it. Instead, we come back to last week, and I think it will actually be last week when I post this. All my sickness means I've caught up with my backlog. Last week I started by taking stock. I knew what I wanted to build and I knew the things that I knew and what I didn't. I thought about working on some of those things, like the enemy pathfinding and the inventory system, but after realising that there was a simple version of the inventory I could build and that the pathfinding system didn't have to be crazy hard, I decided that I had done enough prep work for the jam, at least code-wise. Game jams are meant to be experiences where you build from scratch, and though they always say you can bring in old code, it just felt a bit like I was cheating if I built anything else. At least if I built anything else in code. So this is where we come back to the bit at the beginning where I said my indie dev journey. I'm James and we're going to continue to talk about my coding journey, or, well, actually it's now my indie dev journey, I suppose. Because I realised that the point of me doing the jam is to help me learn to code, not learn to game dev, so I decided to get ahead of things in the art department and get as much art as I could done ahead of time. So for the rest of this video, we're going to be chatting about pixel art instead. On this first day back after making this decision, I decided to do a first pass at environment art. I'd done tile sets once before, but I'd never built a building, so the angles and stuff were all new to me. Thankfully the idea I had has a fairly simple world, so I didn't have to worry about things like brickwork, just wallpaper. I built all the sides and angles, then doors, though I'm pretty sure something's going to go wrong there as I can't have the player's sprite on top of and below the door tile, at least not at my current skill level, and I've given it like a top. I also built a bunch of set dressing. I was originally planning to set this in a modern location, but then I had to make computers, and old chunkers were way easier than laptops and modern monitors and computers, or that's what I thought in my head. It also kind of suits the current idea, though I can see a version where more modern stuff would make sense. I filled out the rest of the items and then, well, I went back and poured blood over everything. I tried a few different things, some simple, some not. I won't place these everywhere, in fact they'll be turned off and on at different times, but I wanted to give myself a bunch of variety and I think I've done that. The rest of the week I focused on getting characters and animations done. Since this was a game jam, I decided not to worry too much about the character and character animations, so I stuck with just 4 frames per animation, leaning heavily on my experience playing old school Pokemon games for the animes and the style. I made one for each direction and called it a day. Something I did do that I probably could have avoided was create a character that was not symmetrical. If I'd created a symmetrical character, then I'd have been able to skip one of the side animations and simply flipped it when it played in that direction. I also considered creating some additional animations for things like idling and performing actions, but since it's a game jam, I decided that for now having the player stand there in the first position of each animation was good enough for both. If I keep going with the project, maybe a kneeling animation, a working animation, or a hiding animation would be good, but for now just having them walk and stand is good enough. On the final day this week, I got to work on the last piece of artwork I needed, the monster that's chasing the player. As it's such a basic creature that's always moving towards you trying to get you, I decided to create a fairly simple thing that lumbers slowly towards you. I'm not entirely happy with it. The up and down walk cycles look really odd, the side walk cycle is a little too static on the top half, and I think it looks too side on and not top down enough, but at least I have something I can work with. I might come back to it later and add effects like smoke coming off it, but I think as far as game jam art goes from a non-artist, this looks great. So with all the artwork done, my week came to an end. I don't know what I'm going to be working on next week, maybe some more prep work since the game jam is the week after, maybe something else for the original project, I'm not sure. After totally dropping my plans from last video, I'm hesitant to put down in words a strict plan, so I'll just think about it over the weekend and decide. One last thing before I go, with this video I've caught up with my backlog, so I'll be unable to post new updates weekly. What I'm thinking about doing is stretching my workflow out a little bit so that I'm posting once a week instead of twice. A short on odd numbered weeks and a longer video like this on even numbered weeks, something like that. If I have a particularly interesting idea for one or the other though and it would come out on the wrong week, that's not going to stop me from doing it. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you're enjoying any of my content or want to support me, the best way to do that is to like, comment and subscribe to make sure that Papa YouTube knows that this is a channel worth watching.